So here are a couple of the studies, the pastel over ink studies that I did on Calton Hill, starting the drawing using pieces of card to apply the ink. And I've decided I'm going to work with the one with the sort of Greek monument, the columns composition. And I'm going to work on this a little bit like I did with the ink and the card. I'm going to apply paint to the canvas using pieces of card. So I've got the same cut up pieces of mounting board. I've pre-mixed colour on my palette. Let's look. So I've prepared some colours, trying to divide, for example, with the sky, I've got a lighter blue and a darker blue. So I've pre-mixed some of those colours, helped a little bit by having used pastel in the drawing, because that guides me towards particular mixtures. And unusually I've got a bit of burnt umber, and I'm going to cover the canvas with burnt umber before I start. So that I'm not working on a white surface, I've just got a bit of dilute burnt umber with which I'm going to effectively stain the canvas. I've mixed it with a bit of spirit, so some of it's running, but that just gets rid of my white canvas and it gives me a slightly wet surface that I can work into. And with the same burnt umber, I'm going to actually draw. So it's perhaps reversing the process that we had with the pastel and the ink and the card and the pastel. But I'm going to draw out some of these shapes. I've got a number one Hoghair brush, which is a long flat, and I can then draw a few lines. But these are just my guide, because I'm then going to apply my pre-mixed colours to the painting using the card. And of course the crucial thing, this is all a bit wet, it's all running, but never mind. The crucial thing about using the card, or one of the crucial things, is that the only way really to make it work is to have enough paint mixed. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing about this approach. Other valuable things are the fact that by applying the paint using the card, you have to simplify, you have to abstract your subject. And so that's all valuable. And this is a terrible runny piece of work. Never mind, let's work with that. I'll dab it with a rag. Here we go, let's just mop up slightly, just so that I don't look completely incompetent. So dried up slightly, there we go, that's not a bad effect. But this is really my guide. This is a burnt umber that I'm drawing with, and I don't think I'm going to rely on the burnt umber particularly. I've got other dark colours mixed on my palette. And what do I want to emphasize in this painting? I actually chose this view because of all the people standing. There are people standing between the columns, and then there was a lovely light, so there are going to be little figures down there, which will eventually be what I emphasize in this composition. And I like the tree with the mountains beyond. So anyway, that's all I need to do with that stage to find my drawing. And then I've picked up some of that pre-mixed paint. You can see it's on the tip of the card, and I'm going to then apply it. In some ways it's probably quite useful for painting something as geometric as this monument. So my surface might be a little bit wet, so you can see I am scraping some off. But the way to make this work really is to float the paint. So you've got to get a bit of a feel for how wet the surface is, how much paint you've got on the piece of card, and the angle, I suppose, at which you hold the card against the canvas. So there you can see sometimes I'm lifting things off. If I carry on, there's not really very much paint left here. So if I try to carry on, I'll just end up taking paint off. So as I said, the first valuable thing about this approach is that you've got to have enough paint. So I would go on with that. So I'm going to go on anyway because I'd like to just show you what happens if there's not enough paint. I mean, I can keep angling this, and then I do find there's a little bit more paint there, but it's virtually all gone. So I really have to stop and remix. So with a bit more paint there on the card, I can go on. I hope nobody's counting the columns because I haven't, and I won't, and I didn't. But I want to get this dark, so it was a kind of silhouetted structure against the lovely bright blue sky, and then there were figures in between. So as with any other painting, I'm trying to start with the main shapes, the main areas. There were, as I say, the figures in the gaps, but also here and there was light coming through and catching just parts of the columns and the base and so on. So that, again, that's something like the figures, which you could call it a detail. I'll come back to that once I've got the big areas in and other things are working in the way that I want them to. So I'll do the sky next, I think, although it might be an idea to have a bit of tree. Let's just get a bit of tree in here anyway. I'm just using the same colour because I want to know where the tree is. So this is the sort of thing that you get, you have to tackle, especially with landscape or can be with other painting subjects, where you've got, for example, which do you do first? Do you do the structure or do you do the sky? Well, actually, the thing is you'll need to go back and forth between the two of them. I'll be painting in the gaps, painting around the tree, and then perhaps restating the tree or restating some of the columns. So it's a bit of both, but the best advice, I think, is to start with the big shapes. So my sky is definitely a big shape. And what I rather liked about the pastel was it was possible to get some of the kind of the movement in the sky because of the way the paint goes on with the card. I don't know if you can see well, but it's going on in slightly different thicknesses, just according to chance, really, the amount of pressure I put on or the amount of paint that's on the piece of card. And so that means that instead of getting a flat, plain sort of quality to the colour, I'm actually getting some different mixtures. I've picked up a bit of brown there. So I think as I get to the columns, I might go for a slightly smaller bit of card. But what I want to try and be sure of is if I've got this lighter blue at that level in the sky, well, then that's what I want to appear in the gaps. And if I do pick up paint from the columns, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It will modify some of my blue in the sky a bit. It'll neutralize it a bit. And this is very much, the usual blocking in stage where I'm just trying to get the main colours down, and I'm going to work back into them. I might work back into them with a brush, but I'll certainly be applying more paint. But you can see that, I'm on 9 minutes of this video, and I've actually got an awful lot done, just because of this abstraction that you can achieve using the bits of card to apply plenty of paint. So we're going to work with the tree. It's actually a dark green. I used a bit of black, ivory black and lemon yellow. And again, something that, what's this painting about? What did I see on the hill that I want to bring out? It's really the strong light, and I'm going to have the distant hills as well to bring out. So I want these dark contrasts. I might use the same bit of card and pick up a slightly lighter green. And you'll see then, of course, that what I'm doing is I'm working from dark to light. Not a bad idea with oil paint. You don't have to work from dark to light, but often it's a little bit easier to manage. So you can see a little bit of light is coming into that tree, and I've got a lot of paint on the surface now. So if I take a lighter colour like this, and I want it to stand out, I've got to be fairly direct, just about floating it on the surface. So that's standing out. If I work it any more, or even what's on my piece of card now, you can see I've picked up a lot of the dark paint. I'm not going to be able to make much of that stand out further. So if I want to maintain that lighter contrast, I either have to mix more paint and carry on building up stronger and stronger, or not stronger, but greater quantities of paint on the surface, or else I need to wipe something off. I could, for example, stretch a rag over my finger and just wipe away some of the paint, some of the dark paint, so that there's an area which is ready to take just a little bit more of a lighter colour. I think I've got enough ready, but then get a little bit on there. So I'm back to the sky, getting some of these areas blocked in, and I've still got some hills in the distance that I'd like to work with. So there will inevitably be mixing of the paint between these different areas, but that, I would say, is part of the point of this approach, that you're using so much paint and that you're abstracting, simplifying to such a degree that paint will mix. But that is the best thing and the worst thing about oil paint. The worst thing is that it mixes on the surface as you try and apply one area next to another. And the best thing about it is that it mixes on the surface as you try and apply one area next to another, and it gives you these kind of accidental, subtle mixtures from one colour to the next, which are ideal for things like sky, where the colour is sort of unpredictably different from one place to the next. So I've given the tree a trunk, and I'm getting some of the grass in the foreground, and then I'm going to then finish with just one or two of the smaller observations, the details if you like, but I want to get some of this light on various places, a bit of light on the slightly dried out grass, brown grass in the foreground. So that's everything covered. I was going to make some slight adjustments to the sky. I made something a little bit lighter. So as I've described, letting some of this paint just mix on the surface. And now I've put a bit of light there, that's supposed to appear through here. Anyway, I'll come back to that because I want to do those lighter things on of the figures and the light on the monument. So I've now cut up some quite small bits of card so that if I'm going to place, for example, some of this light in the sky quite carefully, then I need to be able to work in a small space. And the same applies to putting these figures. I think I want to lean on something just to get in some of these figures silhouetted against the sky. Now they're a little bit darker than my monument, so I think maybe I'll get some of this dark into parts of the monument as well. And then lastly, I would like to get some of the light on the monument as well. So there were points where this light was coming through and catching the other column or the columns on the other side. I want to put them in. And I suppose another feature of this whole approach is, in order for this simplification to work, you need to have colours mixed. You know, you're simplifying an area like this monument into a dark and a light colour, and so it requires some good mixing and not really applying the paint until you're sure you've got the colour that you want. So it can be slow to prepare, but actually very quick to execute, because the work has been done in simplifying and abstracting your subject. So I think that's the place to stop. I might put these in because they were a nice kind of rhythm in the foreground. And you can see sometimes the colours mix. And I suppose what I think is valuable about this in terms of other approaches to painting is that as you learn how to handle the paint that's on the tip of the card, actually you can transfer that approach to how you handle paint on the tip of a brush. And becoming aware of what's on the tip of the brush before you actually apply the paint is enormously useful. Okay.